Dum 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 dum. Here we go. A couple seconds in. Okay, I'm here with my friend Scott Shetler, one of the best strength coaches around, based out of Atlanta, Georgia. And Scott, I wanted to bring you on because you've been in the industry for decades. You've been doing this for a long time, and you've been a fitness enthusiast since you were a teenager like myself. And we're around the same age. You said you're 46, going to be 47 soon. I'm 48, going to be 49 in a couple months. And what I wanted to get is what you've noticed as you've gotten older, just with your own training, and then we'll talk about clients too. So for example, what did you notice between your 20s and 30s, if anything? And then we can talk about your 30s and 40s, just changes you had to make.
Yeah, not 20s to 30s really wasn't a whole lot. Nothing major. You know, I still had a similar capacity. I was training a little bit more. My goals were a little bit more hypertrophy oriented, you know, bodybuilding for lack of a better term. I wasn't competing or anything like that, but it was a little bit more volume based. Wasn't really focused too much on strength training and things like that at that point in time. It was in my early 30s is when I started getting into powerlifting and heavier lifting. And, you know, at that point in time, you're still young enough. You still recover. I think, you know, at least for me in my early 30s, I was recovering pretty well. I was eating big. I wasn't focused on like, you know, losing weight or anything like that. So I was getting plenty of calories, you know, and such. For me, I didn't have much of an issue when I was powerlifting. I was recovering pretty well. I was training pretty hard. The recovery became more of an issue when I got into my early 40s. You know, I thought 40, everything was going to go to shit, you know, but it was really about 42 is when I noticed my recovery was really starting to take a beating. Really had to start dialing back the amount of maximal effort work or near max effort work I was doing, be a little bit smarter in my approach to going heavy. And then I got a little bit more conditioning oriented toward the end of 43 is when I started training jujitsu, and that was like a whole different animal. You know, I didn't have a background in grappling. I'd never done that sort of martial arts training before. So I really had to dial back to heavy strength training. I had to focus a little bit more on bulletproofing, injury proofing the body for a while. And I had to do things that were a little bit more cardiovascular based and a little bit more recovery focused at that point in time. I mean, we can get a little deeper into it as we get going here. But I'd say for me, the recovery really, I started to notice things a little bit more probably in the early 40s.
Right. You know what's scary is how many people I talk to, young guys who are early 30s, and they talk about 30 as if they're already heading downhill.
Yeah.
Since I turned 30, I don't feel that great anymore. And here's something scary. I was watching this clip that Joe Rogan was talking about his TRT and growth hormone routine on YouTube. Yeah. And then I looked at the comments, and there were just dozens of guys in their early 30s all talking about how they started TRT because their levels were low. And I'm going, 30, you're already looking at TRT? Look,
you know damn well why their levels are low, right? Because they're drinking too much, they're partying too much, they're not sleeping, they're not eating. Well, I mean, you know why they're low. If they truly are too low, you know why they're too low at that age.
Right. Absolutely. But that's where I'm going is that they go to a doctor and your total testosterone, free testosterone, let's say it's abysmal. Why don't we look at what your lifestyle is? What are you eating? Are you sleeping? Are you training? How much stress do you have going in your life? Maybe you have financial stress. Who knows? Now, even with all that into account, it shouldn't be that low. That's the scary thing too, because look, when I was in my 20s, I used to drink a lot, have a good time and all that.
Sure.
I never got my testosterone levels measured, but I can't recall feeling like I had low testosterone.
Yeah, absolutely.
At that age. So I mean, 30 is really young to already be suffering the consequences. And that's what gets scary, because I mean, if you're already so depleted at 30 that you're resorting to TRT, imagine where you're going to be at 40. Now, the counter argument could be, well, look, I want to get ahead of this decline in testosterone and then just stay on it indefinitely. I go, okay, fine. But the way I look at TRT is that should be the last option.
Absolutely.
Everything else. You've done everything you can to optimize your own production for as long as possible. It's not working anymore. And there's ways to determine if you're not going to respond to natural methods anymore. You just look at luteinizing hormone. If that's really high and your testosterone's low, then TRT is going to be really the only option. But that's a very small percentage of people who fall into the category. And it's rare that someone in their early 30s, unless they've had some kind of head concussion or some kind of trauma, is in that state. So that's
I could see like football players, MMA fighters, you know, people that have had these these, intense, high collision, combative sports or high collision contact sports, that's definitely, there's a case to be made there. But for the average person who's just, they need to look more at managing stress. They need to look at getting their diet in check. They need to look at getting their rest in check and their training in check. They might be out trying to do CrossFit and not bashing on CrossFit, but CrossFit is a very depleting kind of a training modality. So you really have to, your nutrition has to be on target. Your recovery's got to be on target. Especially if you're trying to do that stuff in your 30s and 40s, you have to be smart about it. So, if you're living the typical high stress lifestyle, eating like shit, not getting a lot of rest, and then you're going to your CrossFit box for your workouts, that could very well be doing it as well,
Yeah. And as we both know, many trainers as well just live on pre-workout stimulant drinks.
Yes.
Not for their workouts, just to get through the day. So they're very caffeinated. Couple cups of coffee is fine, but most go way beyond that, who are depleted and sleep deprived. So you're already sleep deprived. You're relying on fake energy, and then you're pouring fuel. You're just pouring gasoline on the fire by taking even stronger stimulants just to get your own workouts in. Eventually, you're going to crash and burn, and you're going to crash and burn really hard, and it's going to be very difficult to come back from that. Yeah. So it's not something to be taken lightly.
No, not at all.
But it's scary. Early 30s, you're already looking as if your best years are behind you. Early, that's scary.
That's ridiculous.
At this age, I've had to modify things. I have to be a little bit smarter with training, but I probably should have been smarter with training when I was younger anyway.
Sure. Yeah.
And with you, I wonder how much of what you just said, I wonder how much of the fact that you run a business, or you're a super busy guy, you're training people all the time, high active lifestyle, a lot of hands-on work. I wonder how much that takes into play modifications you've had to make, irrespective of your chronological age.
Yeah, I think it definitely, I'm the guy who's always telling my clients what they should do, and I'm not always doing that kind of stuff because my schedule's so sporadic. And there's mornings like I train jujitsu Mondays and Wednesday mornings at 6:30 a.m. So those are two really early days for me. But those are I can't do the night classes. So it's like if I want to train, I've got to adjust my schedule so I can get those sessions in when I can do them. And, sometimes, I might be up late with my dog. I might, not have, as he's getting older, he requires a little bit more attention. He's waking up at night, he needs to go out more frequently, things like that. So I've got to do the best that I can on my schedule. So I don't always get the best sleep every night, but that's kind of the side effect of this sort of business and this sort of lifestyle. It's not an excuse, but I do try to get my sleep in as consistently as possible. I try to wake up a little bit earlier on the days that I don't go to jiu-jitsu and get in before my clients and do my workouts, just so my schedule's a little bit more consistent. And I do try to get, I don't want to sound like I'm not sleeping. I probably get 6 to 7 hours of bedtime a night. Doesn't mean I'm sleeping that whole time, but it's not, this like, hey, I'm sleeping 4 hours a night and grinding, like Gary Vee and all that bullshit that's so popular with these young, go-getters nowadays. But I really do try to make sleep a priority. But then I also have to adjust my strength training a little bit. I might not be able to go as heavy as frequently as I'd like to do. I might need to do a little bit more volume or do things that are a little recovery based. And on top of that, I've been using a HRV app called Morpheus Recovery. It's Joel Jamison's app, and it's really cool because not only does it measure your heart rate variability, it also takes into consideration some other things like your daily activity, i.e., how many steps you hit during the day, your training, the duration, the intensity of your training, as long as you use the app when you're working out and stuff like that. So it's pretty cool because it allows you to optimize your training, and it gives you a daily recovery score based on your HRV, the previous day's training and activity levels, as well as how much sleep you got. And then it asks you a few quantitative and qualitative questions. How are you feeling? How is your nutrition and things like that? And it allows you to fine tune the score on a daily basis. So I think that's been an invaluable tool because there's days where I'm feeling like, hey, I might be able to go in and push it today, but the HRV, the recovery score wasn't so good. Now I'm going to go in and do a little bit, lower intensity, a little bit higher volume, maybe a little bit more aerobic work or something today. And it really allows me to auto-regulate my training in a way that's really beneficial and really optimized for my situation.
Yeah, no, that's really cool. And that's an app you can just
Yeah, I don't know if you've ever listened to Joel, but he's definitely he's been on a lot of podcasts. He does his own thing. He's in Seattle. His gym, I believe, is right next door to Matt Hume's MMA training facility. So he was like Demetrius Johnson's strength coach. I think he worked with Rich Franklin. He worked with a lot of the K1 kickboxers out of Hume's place. I mean, he's worked with a lot of fighters. I think I want to say he might have been either an intern or an assistant strength coach under Bill Gillespie. I don't know if that was Bill's at Liberty University. I mean, he's a big bencher. I think he's cracked 1,000-pound bench. He's a monster, dude. I think Joel was either an intern or an assistant under him. I mean, Joel's he should be more well known, in my opinion, because he's brilliant, especially when it comes to conditioning, when it comes to training energy systems. And he's really brought back the importance of aerobic training, because as you know, aerobic training's been shit on for a lot of time, for a lot of years now. And if you're not doing high intensity intervals,
Yeah, I was watching some old Charles Poliquin interviews, and of course he was tearing into that.
Oh yeah. And I mean, the thing is like, you always have to keep, when I listen to people like Poliquin and some of these other really high level coaches, you always have to keep in mind who they're working with. All right. So when you're working with the top athletes in the world, you're talking about an athlete that's probably already got a tremendous aerobic base. They might not need, unless they're an endurance athlete, they might not need as much focus on aerobic training as, the power athletes and those types of athletes that he's training. So I always try to keep that in mind when I listen to, coaches like, who are they working with? What's the pool that they're drawing their information from,
You also have to look at what is your heart health, right?
Yes.
Well, I don't need aerobics. Okay. Well, what's your blood pressure? Because
exactly.
There's no way to rationalize a high blood pressure and make it sound healthy. Now, we don't all have to be in this 120/80 below that, right? There's going to be some variability where some people can be higher than that and their arteries are still clean and all that. But if you're at 170/110, and you're just lifting heavy weights, and then you're somehow trying to rationalize, no, my heart's just fine.
No, that might be an issue.
Yeah, so let's not kid ourselves. And then people often like to argue, like I was posting this the other day because I had some blood work done recently, and my cholesterol is the best. I mean, my cholesterol is never high as a vegan for 28 years, but it was really good. The HDL at 55, total was only 130.
Nice.
And testosterone levels were really good. And it made me laugh thinking about how many people say, oh, cholesterol doesn't matter, but those are always people with really elevated levels.
Yes.
They're trying to rationalize that. Now, if someone with low levels tells me that, I'll be like, okay, let me elaborate more. I want to hear what you have to say.
Sure.
But a lot of times it's just cognitive dissonance of you're looking at your numbers, and instead of accepting the truth that, hey, these aren't very good numbers, maybe I should do something to get them down, you're trying to rationalize why it's that way. So, I mean, if I go get my blood pressure checked and it's really high, I'm not going to rationalize why it's okay for it that it's high. I'm going to kick into gear and make sure I get it into an optimal range.
Yeah, absolutely.
So with Joel Jamieson, actually, we'll come back to that in a second. I wanted to go off on a tangent with Gary Vee real quick because this is going to be a total tangent from what we're talking about, but we'll bring it back. Okay, here's what cracks me up about him. He's always talking about how don't waste time consuming content, right? Be a content creator, just massive content. You want to get as many other people looking at your content, but don't waste time looking at other people's content.
Yeah.
And that sounds pretty shady, doesn't it? Doesn't it sound like, look, I'm going to waste my time looking at what other people are doing, but I want everyone else to look at what I'm doing. And that's
exactly
Instagram in a nutshell, where you have these influencers with 1 million followers. They don't care about what their followers are doing. A lot of times they don't even follow anybody. You look at how many people they follow, it's 5 or 0. Yeah. So clearly they're out there to get people to look at what they're doing. But it's don't be the person that wastes time consuming content, but make sure you make a lot of content for other people to waste time.
Exactly.
And it's so shady.
Dude, I just based on your little rant on your stories the other night, I mean, I think you and I could probably do an entire hour just on our thoughts on social media and Instagram and quote unquote influencers and stuff like that. I mean, it's such a bad rabbit hole to dive down.
Trying to be profound. So they have a picture of them. I mean, maybe it's like a guy with his shirt off, sweating after a workout, and he has a Rumi quote. Or it's a girl in a bikini on the beach drinking something, and it's this profound quote.
Yeah.
it's so fake, man. It's just
So fake.
yeah, it's just, you know what? Don't try to be profound. Just be shallow. You know, you got that part down. So, so just keep doing that. And then it's always funny when why are you quoting someone else and then have a picture of yourself?
Exactly. I'd respect it so much more if they were just like, hey, check me out. You know what I'm saying? I mean, like, hey, I'm here to show my ass. You know, I mean, right on. You know, I mean, if you're going to call it what it is, then, you know, but when you're trying to be a motivational speaker, but you're just posting your ass in a thong or something like that, you know, I mean, it's just so, it's ridiculous, man. I mean, it's just, there's you know, on Instagram, how you'll get like a recommendation to follow this person because of, you know, the topics that they post or the hashtags they use, or, you know, you get suggestions every time you log in. So there was this girl, I don't know if I want to call her out. I went to her page, and of course she's got like just umpteen zillion followers and stuff. Every picture of her is the same. So she's a vegan. She's got the biggest, fakest tits you've ever seen, and every photo is her sitting there with, you know, them on display holding up some food item, whether it's a restaurant that she's visiting or something she's made or something like that. And there's that stupid motivational quote underneath it, you know, but the photos are all the same. It's just a different outfit and a different food item. And of course, you know, 15,000 likes, 20,000 likes. And when you read the things that she's posted, it's not even, you know, it's not even that they're these half-assed motivational quotes, or, you know, I'd buy it if it was like, hey, I just did a review on this vegan restaurant or something, like, you know, shock me with the review. If you're going to sell your body, shock me with the review or something intelligent. And it's not even that, man. I mean, it's just all it is just like low-class TNA, and it's ridiculous, man.
Yeah, it's just it's a clickbait mentality.
Exactly.
Mentality of, and also I read this book recently by Johan Hari called Stolen Focus. And basically, the more controversial you are online, the more people are going to see it, because it fits into those algorithms. So if I put up a post where it's just a very balanced post about training advice, that's going to get, let's say, X amount of views, let's say 100 views. Now, if I put a post talking about all these systems that are popular and how much they suck and why that the people who run it are idiots, and I talk in that kind of tone, all of a sudden it's going to be, it's going to feed into that algorithm and go out to a lot more people. But I refuse to do that. I'm not going to play the game. I'm just like, okay. No. Because people are like, well, you got to do what works. Like, no. I'm going to do what works for me. I'm not going to put myself out there that way. That's not the way I'm going to carry myself.
You need to be true to yourself, and that's something I've always liked, especially like, I mean, just knowing you in person, but I mean, like your podcast, you know, you and Sincere, I've always liked those shows because it's always more just this laid back. It'd be like if we were all going out to dinner and having a conversation, you know, or something like that. I mean, it's really informal. It leads to much better content. You know, it's not manufactured, it's not fake, it's all real. And there's other podcasts out there too that do it like that, which is why I'm a fan of those shows as well. But that's the one thing I always liked about how you guys did it, because you get some great content out there, but it's in a much more just relaxed, more conversational setting, and it's so much more real, man. I just hate, you know, when things are overly scripted and just you can smell fake bullshit a mile away, you know.
Yeah, that's the key.
Maybe that's us getting old and crotchety now, you know.
All right, now back on task. We'll get back to trading now. It's always fun to go up on tangents. Now, sleep quality is really important, because that's what I noticed actually, it's not even so much that I noticed, because I've always understood the importance of sleep. It was just that you were able to get away with poor sleep at a certain point, early 20s, early 30s. Now I prioritize sleep. I make a point of getting 8 hours, sometimes more, sometimes 9 hours if I'm training really hard. Now I can afford to do that. Not everyone can afford to do that. Yeah. But I tell you, the other reason why I do it is because I love sleeping. I mean, it's pleasurable to me. I enjoy it. I love waking up. I'm like, oh man, it feels so good to be in bed. And you look at the clock, you're going, oh cool, I got 2 more hours. Let me go back. It just feels good. And then you wake up refreshed. You don't need a ton of stimulants to get going. Now, someone listening is going to go, well, look, Mike, that's easy for you. You set your own schedule. I have to wake up at 6 a.m. I have a gym to run, or I have a job to go to, or I have to commute. Well, I mean, those are all valid. I mean, at the end of the day, it's all excuses is what I'm saying. Sure. You can see whatever's going on, and no matter how real it is, it's still an excuse. So then you have to start looking at, well, what can I cut out of my routine that is not serving it? You know, maybe not watch 4 hours of Netflix every night. maybe not waste 2 hours on social media. I mean, you just have to look at all the things where you're wasting time.
Yes.
I think that takes away a lot too, because where I find that I do much better with higher frequency and lower volume. So I take the intensity fairly high, not to failure, but somewhat close to it. But that requires a certain level of focus. So if I'm sitting there looking at my phone in between sets and I'm texting people and I'm posting stuff, I'm not going to get the most out of that. I'm going to miss that opportunity. But if I can prioritize my time there, I'm going to get the workout done faster. It's going to be more productive. And then I have more time to sleep.
Yes. Yeah.
I'm not wasting time on the non-essentials.
Yeah, absolutely, man. Sleep. It's an important thing to prioritize. And the other thing is too is, if you can get 8 hours a night, that's great, but even people that can only get, 6, 7 hours or so a night, 7 hours is not bad. I mean, you can do pretty well on 7 hours. All the books on sleep that I've read is they say, try not to get less than 7 hours, 8 or more being the optimal, depending on, your lifestyle and how hard you're training and such. But, getting 7 hours and then also getting a nap during the day, if you can squeeze that in, can be beneficial. Right? There's certain things that you can do where maybe you don't get that 8 hours every single night, but there's things that you can do and get a nap, do things that enhance, recovery and things like that. That can be very beneficial, as well. But I have a hard time getting sleep, and I manage to be in bed for 7 hours, most nights. So it's like you said, it's an excuse. If you're getting less than 6 hours a night, you're probably wasting a lot of time that you think is really productive. You know what I'm saying? And it's like you said, it's people spending a lot of time on social media. And I think because so much of the quote unquote grind and hustle and business is being done online nowadays, and because social media does impact it so much, people get stuck getting on social media. And it's not even just making that social media post. It's not even posting content. It's like, I'm going to go post this content. Then I get sucked down the rabbit hole of what everybody else is posting, and I'm commenting, and I'm getting, worked up about this. And now I've killed 2 hours when really I should have been online for about 5-10 minutes, making my post, getting it uploaded and then getting out of there, So I think you're right. There's definitely a lot of places where people are wasting a lot of time. And you just need to evaluate and prioritize, your sleep, your training, your recovery, your nutrition, and then the real things that you have in your life that are real responsibilities. If you got a family, if you got kids, if you got pets, things like that, that's real responsibilities that you got to take care of,
Yeah. I find also, when I was in college, I remember reading an article in Muscle Media 2000. Remember it? That magazine.
That was such a great magazine, man.
It was really good in the early days. The first several years were really good. And it was revolutionary for the time compared to the other magazines that were available.
It was when it was still Muscle Media 2000. It was when it became Muscle Media is when it kind of changed. But the Muscle Media 2000 years were awesome.
Yeah, they were really good. I would love to get my hands on a couple copies of some of those older magazines because they were really good. Maybe there's stuff online. But I remember there was an article that just talked about all the benefits of massage and how great it is and how elite athletes in Bulgaria and all over the world use it often daily after each workout. Not necessarily an hour full massage, but just working on the areas that you just put your body through. And I didn't have the money at the time, of course, to get massages regularly, but I made a mental note. I go down the line, I want to do an experiment where I get a massage once a week and see what difference it makes in my training. So fast forward to 2014, I started doing that. I found this really good lady. I started going to her once a week. And I went to her once a week for years because it made such a huge difference. Now I go maybe once every couple of weeks. I'm not training as heavy as I have in the past. So my body's not as beat up. But when I was doing really heavy deadlifts often, even with really good technique, your back is still going to feel kind of stiff. Your body's going to just feel stiff. And just getting a massage regularly just worked out all of that, all of the inflammation, so that basically what you're doing is you're avoiding accumulating inflammation. Yeah. So a massage once a year, well, that's a whole year of me just accumulating, and then I finally get some relief, and one time's not enough to counter all of that. But if I go to her once a week, it's almost like getting a checkup for your car. Like just making sure everything is working fine, because she can work on the body and say, hey, you're way more sore here. It's like, hey, your lower right back, Because one thing I found is my lower right back kept getting sore after training, like somewhat painful. And I thought it was something with my deadlift. I thought maybe my alignment is not right. And what I realized is it has nothing to do with the deadlift. It was some of the moves I was doing afterwards. I was doing heavy dumbbell overhead work where you have to kick it in place. And sometimes benches, you're a little bit out of alignment. The benches I go to at UFC Fit, one of the problems is they're a little bit more narrow than what I'm used to. Yeah. And sometimes just kicking those weights in line, and then as you're pressing, you might come off a little bit. And that's what was causing it, because I cut all of those moves out. I've been doing just machines for overhead pressing and chest and so forth, and not even a little bit sore. So it's not that there's something wrong with those dumbbell pressing motions. It's just that I'm doing something wrong.
It's the setup, yeah.
Yeah, so I have to get better at the setup. But that's one of the difficult things. As you get stronger with dumbbells, it's hard to get it in place on your own.
Yeah. Yeah, you start pressing the hundreds or more. Yeah, absolutely, man. I mean, you start getting up around there, it is tough to set up.
Yeah. I mean, these people that use 150-pound dumbbells, I mean, unless you're doing flat bench, you really have to have someone help you get those in alignment.
Yeah.
Get those in line, especially for seated overhead press.
Yeah. And I've seen those hooks that they make, that you can set up in the power rack or whatever, that you can hang the dumbbells, and some of that stuff's pretty cool. I mean, I don't press that heavy with dumbbells, and it's certainly nothing that I would need, but necessity is the mother of invention.
Yeah. I mean, my favorite overhead move to this day is still double kettlebell pressing. And
yes.
I don't have any kettlebells that are so heavy that I can't clean them safely and effectively into place. Yeah. I rarely go above 70s at this point. I find that's a nice group. That's the other thing too, is it's interesting. I'm doing this program where I'm deadlifting 405 3 times a week, and I just do a couple sets of 5, and then on the last set, if I feel like it, I take it further, I rep out. So for example, today, just earlier, I did the first 2 sets of 5 felt really easy, because I've been doing this for a couple of weeks now, so my nervous system is really primed for this. And I go, let me see what I can do. Let me see if I can get 12 on the 3rd set. And I did 12, and that felt really good. I felt like I could have done 14, and maybe 14 or 15 would have been failure or the limits. Now, the key with this is that it requires discipline to not go heavier, because when you're lifting 405 and it's just flying off the ground, you start thinking, let me just put another plate on each side and see how that feels. And I've been very disciplined not to do it. I almost did it today, especially when there's other people around. You're like, yeah, I'm going to show these people what's up, even though they're not even looking at what you're doing.
No, they don't care. But, in your mind.
About what you're doing. It's all in your head. It's like, I'm going to show everyone at this gym. And then I started thinking, I go, you know what? First of all, that's not a way. That's a way you've lifted many times before. So who cares if you can do it right now? And it's going to derail the program, because if I did that, now I'm going to be a little bit burned out going into Friday's workout, and I'm not going to get the deposit training or the practice that I want.
Yeah, but
I can increase the reps without wear and tear. So in other words, I did that 12. My body feels great. My back's not stiff, because the weight is not that heavy. But if I'm 193 and I'm lifting 5 plates, even if I can lift it fairly easily, that's 2.5 times body weight around there. Yeah. That's going to be way more wear and tear on your body too. Now, I bring this up for this reason. One of the other things you have to take into account is if you started training in your 20s, let's say you're way stronger in your 40s. Well, that's way more stress on your body.
Yes.
Well, forget about your age. If you were deadlifting 300 pounds in your 20s, you're just getting started. Now you're in your 40s and you're pulling 500 pounds for sets of 5, and you're lifting heavy dumbbells and all that. It's not so much that you're in your 40s. That's the problem. It's that you're lifting way heavier than you did before. So that has to be taken into account.
Yeah. And it's just stress on the nervous system, but it's also accumulation and adaptation. You can train yourself. You can train yourself to tolerate the higher volumes, the higher lows, but you have to train yourself. You got to get yourself conditioned, so that you can be trainable at that level. You have to be. And one of the things you said a minute ago that I've always liked, and you use this analogy a lot, but you talk about how your workouts are like your deposit training. It's making a deposit in that bank account, so that one day down the road, you're going to make a big withdrawal, and that's going to be the day you might test your max, or you might push it a little bit, but you're making those deposits so that day is successful. You're not going in and smashing yourself every day. And in a smart approach like that, where you're gradually increasing the loads, where you're gradually exposing the tissues to this loading, you're allowing that stuff time, the connective tissues to adapt to the load. You're allowing greater adaptation over a longer period of time. Getting strong it's a marathon, not a sprint, and not slow twitch, fast twitch muscle fiber I'm talking about here, but it takes a while for the body to become if you do it smartly. I think one of the things is that you see with these younger lifters, like these ones, there's a lot of flash in the pans that come out in their early 20s, and they're lifting like 7 days a week and maxing out all the time and posting these big lifts on Instagram. After about a year or two, you don't hear about those people anymore. Oh, they got hurt, they did this, they did whatever. If you look at the people that have trained smart and hard, but smart their entire career, you're talking about people like Ed Cohn. You're talking about people like, Louis Simmons, who pushed his body to the brink, but he always prioritized recovery. He always prioritized restorative measures. He always prioritized smaller workouts to help the body, to condition the body to adapt to the heavier loads and the higher volumes, that he was doing in his program. So when you look at the people that had longevity in their lifting careers, I think that's where you can glean some real wisdom from. Ed Cohn was a master at picking his weights. He never overshot anything. He always made conservative jumps every time he set up a training cycle for himself. And his biggest jumps, week to week, were like 15 pounds. I mean, and that was a big jump. I've heard him say, on different interviews and stuff like that, whereas less skilled people should be looking at 5 to 10 pounds, 10 pounds at the most, long term, small, steady gains. I always like, Louis Simmons always talked about two of his biggest benchers, George Halbert and Kenny Patterson. They would always come into the gym and hold up the 2.5s. And they'd say, this is the plan. We're going to break that max by 2.5 pounds and we're going to shut it down. And he'd always say, people would say to him, well, what's 2.5 pounds? And I said, well, 2.5 pounds a month is 60 pounds at the end of the year. And you'd pay me for progress like that.
Yeah, exactly. Let's talk about Westside for a second, because do you think that style of training is sustainable?
I think it is if you make some modifications. And one of the things to, the conjugate system that Westside is popular, or Louis is popularized through Westside, is essentially 2 days where you're maxing out and 2 days where you're doing higher volume, lower weights, but you're doing with max force production, right? The maximal effort method, the dynamic effort method. Well, the maximal effort method, if you read in Zatsiorsky's book, The Science and Practice of Strength Training, he describes the maximal effort method as lifting weights in excess of 90% or higher. Louis always talks about maxing out on the max effort day, but rotating to a different variation of the lift. You're never doing the classical lift. You're always doing a variation of the squat, the deadlift, the good morning, or the bench press. You're never doing the classical competitive lift, right? So by changing the lift on a weekly basis, particularly if you do lifts that you're weaker at, that expose your weaknesses, that's going to limit the amount of weight you're actually lifting compared to the classical lift. But because it's such a hard variation, it's still going to be a maximal effort. It's still going to be a slower velocity lift, right? So if you think about this, if you squat 500 pounds and you decide, on max effort day, I'm going to do a low box squat, 3 inches below parallel, 4 inches below parallel to a box, which, is going to take away the rebound. Box squatting done properly is very, very difficult because it's static overcome by dynamic, breaks the stretch shortening cycle. And then you're going to do it with a specialty bar, like the safety squat bar with that big camber that pulls you forward, and stresses the back. Right. You're not going to come close to what you're free squatting in a competition with that variation, but it's going to take, maybe you can only max out 350 on that lift, right? 150 pounds under your best free squat. It's going to take you as long to complete that 350 on the low box squat as it does to complete the 500-pound free squat. So you're going to have the same level of strain. It's still going to be a maximal effort, but because I picked a harder variation of the lift, it's allowing me to max out with a lighter weight. So the perception of the nervous system is it's only 350, but it's freaking hard because I'm going 4 inches below parallel to a low box with a harder specialty bar, which makes the lift even harder to complete. Does that make sense?
Oh yeah.
So, but the problem is I think when a lot of people do the Westside method, they pick exercises that allow them to use super maximal loads. They do the 4 board presses, and they do the high box squats, and they do the rack pulls, and they do the things that allow them to lift. If they're a 500-pound squatter, well, a high box squat, they're going to do, maybe 650 or something like that, because they want that heavier weight. And I don't think that sort of lifting is beneficial. So I think you have to pick the loads pick the exercises intelligently on the max effort day. But I don't think you need to go to that grinding all out max. I think you can get up around that 90% range most of the time, where you're using a circa maximal load that you feel the weight, but you're still completing it with good technique. Right. You know what I'm saying? And you're not going to a ball busting max. I think if you do that, you can have some longevity in that program. And I think that's a much better approach for, maybe an athlete, a recreational athlete, or somebody who's a non-competitive lifter. Because, as Charles Poliquin always say, if you want to, get bigger, if you want to build muscle, you have to lift heavier weights at some point in time. It doesn't mean you need to go, gut busting competition 1 rep maxes all the time, but you got to get heavier, because by increasing your strength, you're able to use heavier weights for your volume training, which is going to help improve hypertrophy and stuff. Like, you can't just keep lifting, 100 pounds over and over. You got to push that weight up and up and up. And you do that by getting stronger.
Well, what do you think about changing the tempo as a form of increasing the resistance? Meaning,
I love slowing the tempo down, and I think that's one of the things too. As I've gotten older, that's been very beneficial on my joints. By reducing my lifting speed, I can get more out of a lighter weight. And I think that's very beneficial, especially when you're talking about joint health.
And what about static contraction training? Are you familiar with that? Pete Sisko's training, that seems to go in waves in popularity. It's starting to come back a little bit.
So would this be like, would it be isometric? So, or would it be more, you're just like flexing the muscle statically? Give me a description of it.
Okay. So an example of static contraction would be this. Let's say you do a leg press, you put on way more weight than you could do a full rep with.
Okay.
And you lower it maybe an inch or 2 from lockout, and then you just hold it there for a couple seconds.
Yeah. Sure.
And then you lock it out. Now that's it though. That's all you do. You don't do full range before or after. This is what you do on each movement that you work on. So if you're doing an overhead press, you would just set the pins in a squat rack. You would lower it a couple inches from lockout, just hold it there as long as for a couple seconds. And then I think you would work up to, let's say you go from 3 seconds to 6 seconds, and then you increase the weight. Now, I don't argue that there's some merit to something like this, but you see people like Tony Robbins and others just putting this training system out there, propagating it as if it's the ultimate way to train. And they go, yeah, you can just do this once every 7 days. It becomes like a haircut. Once every 10 days, you just do one of these. And I
don't buy it.
See this kind of training advice, because you're just lying to people.
Yeah, I don't buy it.
You're just feeding them what they want to hear. They want to hear, oh yeah, I only have to work out for 10 minutes once every 10 days, and I'm going to make more progress than if I did it the other way. No, it doesn't work like that. You don't need to do 2-3 hours, 6 days a week. But let's not kid ourselves here, thinking that 5-10 minutes you're actually going to get a good workout in.
Well, just think about it scientifically though, because I'm a proponent of full range of motion. Like, I believe that the joints need to be exercised through a complete and full range of motion in order to make the greatest progress, right? But if you look at, say, now static contraction, the way you described it, is not isometrics, but it is a static hold, right? We're at a zero velocity at some point in the lift because we're going to take it down, a few inches, hold it. But it's not isometric because we're not creating maximal force and not moving the load. But if you look at the science behind isometric training, it says that isometrics will build strength 10 to 15 degrees above and below the point that you're working the isometric at in your strength curve or in the range of motion. So typically, if I want to train isometrics in the deadlift, I'm going to have to do about 4 or 5 different heights to cover the complete range of motion, right? And isometrics are very beneficial, especially in sports like grappling and wrestling and sports that are where static strength is a little bit more emphasized. Isometrics are very beneficial. They're beneficial to the weightlifter. I mean, isometrics are a form of training that just doesn't get enough credit. They used to be way popular. That's why Bob Hoffman made the first power racks, you had those pins that you could pull and press into to work the isometrics. If not, they would have kept using squat stands and bench jacks and stuff like that. But that being said, it just scientifically, just to do that partial range of motion, it doesn't make sense.
Well, that's the other lie, is that if you do this, it carries over to full range, which is, there's no way it's going to. Okay. No. Doing deadlifts, 2-inch deadlifts from the top, we're not going to carry. It's not going to help me off the floor. That's just
not at all.
Let's just think about this logically. The only way it may help is that it just primes your nervous system to get used to a heavier weight. You go, okay, sure, this is what the weight feels like. Yeah. But that's not enough. I mean, if you're not practicing full range, why would you get better at full range? You get better at what you actually practice.
Yeah, powerlifters back in the day, like I've read some of the articles from the original Westside Barbell Club in Culver City. Pat Casey, who is one of the greatest powerlifters ever, they used the method, they called it heavy supports, where they would do either lockout holds or they would do those partial ranges of motion with heavier weights, but they would work that into their bench training, their squat training, or deadlift training. They're still training a full range of motion, but it's like you said, they're using that to stimulate the nervous system. They're using that to make the training load of the day maybe feel lighter. Right. If you bench 300 and you support 350 or 400, whatever, if you're training at say 285 or 275 that day, that weight's going to feel pretty damn light after holding that weight. And I used to see it back in the day when I used to work with kids that were going into these high school and college like football combines and stuff like that, where they had to bench press either 185 or 225 for reps. They always did better. And I always tested this with them. If they warmed up to 225 and repped it out, or if they worked up to say 315, or if they were strong enough, 365 for a single, and then went to their 225, they always did more reps, like 3 to 5 more reps of 225 when they had that heavier single prior to their max out set. Same athlete, 2 different methods of warming up. So there was something neurologically happening when they had that heavier weight in their hand.
I can attest to that personally. I mean, the most I ever benched 225 was for 19 reps. It's on YouTube. And it was after I did 365 for 1 rep. I mean, like maybe 5 minutes afterwards. And that weight, I mean, it felt like I was benching a wiffle bat. I mean, it was the first 10, 15 reps. It's just flying, because it just feels so much lighter after 365.
Now go back to that, and I don't know if you've ever done this, but go back to that and don't go up to 365. Hit 135, hit 185, 205, and then hit your 225. Do you think you would have done better or worse warming up that way if you hadn't taken that heavier single, prior to the attempt?
A heavier single psychologically just gives you a lot of confidence.
Absolutely.
Because if you only, let's say I never go heavier than 405, it's not going to feel as light as it will if I go up to 505 and then come back to 405 later.
Exactly.
Now it's going to fly off. Yep. So the heaviest weight you lift is always going to feel heavy if you don't go beyond that. You have to go or build the reps or do something else.
Yeah, and Poliquin did something similar with one of his methods. I don't know if it was a wave loading method where you would do 5 reps, 3 reps, and 2 reps or something like that. And then you do a second wave with like 5 pounds more, and then a third wave like 5 pounds. You know what I'm saying? So each wave got a little bit heavier, but only 5. But it dramatically increased your training volume for the day. But there was this neural thing where after that first wave, the second wave, even though because it was you were priming your nervous system for those heavier loads, it made it easier to go up, on subsequent waves. Right.
And the other thing that reminds me of static contraction is, let's say super slow training was really popular for a while, right? And some people like Steve Maxwell still recommend it now. And I definitely think there's merits to super slow training.
Yeah, absolutely.
Here's where I think it has some flaws, the way it was marketed and promoted. Because they always say, we took this study of senior citizens, we put them on a super slow training program, and their strength went up 50%. Okay, of course it went up 50%. These people are never trained before. They never
worked. They're senior citizens.
Their life. Yeah, they're senior citizens. And any training system they did would have produced those results. They didn't have to do those really slow contractions. They could have done fast contractions and they would have gotten stronger. Now they're less likely to get injured doing slow, but I don't think you have to go that slow. All right? 10-second negative, 5-second concentric, something like that. Maybe it's the reverse of that. But it was something really slow, and you're never going to get to the heavy weights when you go that slow. I understand slowing down the movements, but you still want a certain level of intensity that involves the actual weight being heavy.
Yeah. Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. And honestly, what was kind of funny about the super slow stuff, and I don't know if maybe this is why Steve liked it, being a wrestler and a jiu-jitsu participant, those like super slow, contractions and stuff like that, like on push-ups or squats or things like that, it really carries over to the grappling sports, like I mentioned earlier, where static contractions are much more common. And what's interesting, there's a guy by the name of John Saylor, who's he was a national team judo coach. He runs Shingi Tai Jiu Jitsu. He's in Ohio. My friend Sean is one of his students. And John put out this great book years ago about strength and conditioning for grapplers or fighters or something along those lines. But one of the methods that he talked about are these like super slow push-ups and like quasi isometrics, where you'll take like maybe a minute to go down, a minute to go up. That kind of training, it's absolutely grueling, but it's got so much benefit to those sportsmen, who participate in the grappling sports, because static contraction is so important. Now that's not the only method he recommended, but it's kind of funny, that those super slow. I don't think they'd be great for like your senior citizen stuff like that, because when you're using, I mean that can be absolutely grueling, and like you said, it goes a little bit beyond safety. But I definitely see a value for certain types of athletes for doing those types of methods. I even heard of I think some Russian wrestlers who would do quasi isometric squats, where they would take something like they called it the 5-minute squat. They would take two and a half minutes to go down in the eccentric, 2.5 minutes to come up in the concentric. Man, that's
crying. You're gonna be crying doing that. Yes. People have no idea how hard that is. Maxwell talked about a guy that he worked with that could squat a lot of weight with the barbell, and he had him do something like that, where you just did these body weight squats, but you just did the lower 2/3 of the motion, so you never locked out and got a break. Yes. And it was really slow. And he said this guy couldn't even complete a rep; he was just dying.
Yeah.
If you're not used to that, if you've never done that before, I mean, look, just doing a Hindu squat where, let's say, you do 30 seconds down, 30 seconds up.
Brutal.
Probably not going to be able to complete it the first time you try. It's going to be brutal. You have to work up to things like that. Before we wrap up, let's talk about things with nutrition. How has what have you noticed with nutrition that you've had to modify as you've gotten older?
I think one of the most important things is, and I'm going to steal a quote that I heard in a podcast recently, where a famous grappling coach was talking about nutrition, and his name is John Danaher, and he made the comment about amazing guy. I think he was on Lex Friedman's podcast with GSP and one of his students, Gordon Ryan, and they were talking about nutrition, and he made the comment about how for the older person, meaning like the over 40, eating for longevity. Now that he didn't talk about what his ideas of eating for longevity were, but he said eating for longevity is important. I'm paraphrasing, but something along those lines. And I really like that, because one of the things that you don't think about when you're 20 is longevity. You'll eat, whatever gains, bro, slamming down the protein, eating a bunch of high calorie junk food and stuff like that. But when you get around that 35, 40, it was for me, is when I started looking at nutrition for health span, and improved. So it wasn't all about just packing on size and gaining weight and stuff like that, which I think, when you're young, that's probably a good thing to do. But as we get older, that might not be the healthiest thing to do. We might not, stimulating a lot of muscle growth and a huge anabolic response in the body might not be the best thing for long-term health. And the things that I've heard from people that dabble in the longevity sciences and stuff like that, they would concur with that. That's where I've gotten that information from. And they start talking about things that go way over my head, like mTOR and all this stuff.
Well, that's what I was going to say. The mTOR is the one that they bring up, because mTOR is something that people that want to pack on a lot of size, you want to stimulate that.
Yes.
Now, but for longevity purpose, it may stimulate things you don't want, such as cancer, things along those lines. So at a certain point, now you don't want to deplete it, but you want to modify it. So it's interesting. Exactly. Things change. It's not a question of good or bad. It's a question of what are you actually trying to achieve.
Yeah, and I would never, your life is your life, man. Whatever you want to do with it. If you want to go balls to the wall and you want to sacrifice years, and you're cool with that, right on, man. You have it's your life to live. Like Louis Simmons always likes to say, he said, when it was time for me to die, I'm the one that's got to die. So while I'm alive, let me lead the life I want to live, right? And I respect that. I respect that. But I also think that a lot of us, as we evolve, our perspectives change, and we reserve the right to do so. And I think one of the important things, at least from my perspective, is with nutrition. And when I'm working with people, even with who I would consider like more recreationally competitive athletes, like people in their masters, divisions and things like that, in their chosen sports and things like that. You can't go about it like you would if you were competing when you were 20 years old. We have to look at health, and we've got to look at longevity. And I think that when it comes to nutrition, eating for longevity is the key. And not even, I know you and I are both vegan, but with taking the vegan and the ethics out of it, I have a hard time buying that a nutrition plan that has a large focus on plant-based foods is a bad idea. I just think that there's just I can't wrap my head around the idea that a mostly plant-based diet wouldn't be the best thing to do for longevity. And when I say plant-based, I'm talking like whole food plant-based, not processed, vegan foods and shit like that. I'm talking about fruits, vegetables, beans, legumes, nuts, seeds, all the good whole unprocessed plant foods. If that is what the bulk of your nutrition consists of, I think you're on the right track.
Yeah. No, 100%. Do you find that if you eat too much junk food, you just pile on body fat a lot faster?
Yes. Yeah. And that's what I use as my indicator. I mean, I'm not shredded, but I've got visible abs, I've got lean muscle definition, and when that stuff starts smoothing out a little bit, I know it's time to put the Beyond Burgers away. I know it's time,
about abs is that I used to make fun of people like Maxwell and these other guys that were like pushing 50 when I was in my late 20s, early 30s. Because these guys, you couldn't find a picture of them without their shirt off. They always said they couldn't wait to take their shirt off. I'm like, what's up with all these old guys always walking around trying to show off their abs? And now that I'm close to that age, I get it now, because now I have my abs look pretty good now. So now I'm going, hey, I'm gonna, I would probably work out in the gym without a shirt on if I could. Okay,
exactly right.
Like, hey man, I'm pushing 50 and I still got abs, or I had for the first time. So I said that now it's funny how those kind of things change.
Well, and it's not even just like, I mean, the vanity thing aside, but I mean, being leaner is definitely a good thing too, especially when it comes to preventing,
you feel better. I don't need to be at 100% body fat. I don't even know what my body fat is. I can just see visible abs, and that's enough, because I'm not on any extreme diet. I eat as much as I want. I just eat healthy food most of the time. I have junk here and there, but I don't deprive myself at all. I literally eat as long as I'm hungry. I will eat, but I'm making healthy choices. I'm eating almonds, pistachios, nuts and seeds, fruits, vegetables. It's hard to overdo those where it's going to pile up a lot of body fat.
Exactly.
Where pile up a lot of body fat is all the processed stuff, because that's easy to overdo. It's easy to overdo cookies and coconut ice cream and things that are high in calories but low in actual nutrition.
Yes.
You're giving your body anything. Your muscles, liver, cells are not getting fed. So you're just the hunger signal never shuts off. You can eat into perpetuity like that.
Yeah, and I think that stuff, that stuff can be part of a healthy lifestyle and a healthy nutrition too, because you don't want to deprive yourself of the fun things too. You just can't let that stuff rule, and if you're getting to the point where you're just eating too much of it, just shut it off for a while, man. It's not that hard to do. I mean, it takes as much effort to put a cookie in your mouth as it does a forkful of a spinach salad or something. There's no more energy required to do that. So it just comes down to discipline. And, if you want to be healthy, those are the choices that you've got to make, and I think, and the nice thing is when you're lean and you're training hard, you can, have, time or two during the week where you get to enjoy your favorite, snack food or junk food or something like that, as long as it doesn't become regular habit. I don't think there's anything wrong with that.
I think one salient point is, as you get older, it's imperative that you don't pile on a lot of body fat.
Yes.
Because it's much harder to lose it at a certain point.
Yeah.
And part of that is because people's activity level goes down as they get older, more so than their metabolism. That's a big part of it. Clarence Bass brought that up. So what I do, what's funny is I lift weights 3 times a week at the gym, but every day I get at least 10,000 steps in with Raina,
Yes.
a dog. And we live in an area where there's a lot of big hills. And so it's not a workout where you need to take a nap afterwards, but you can do it every day, but it's activity. So now I'm just adamant about getting those 10,000 steps. If I don't have it in the evening, I'll just go walk around the block with her because I want to get over that. Because I think that's one of the healthiest things you can do for yourself is increase, instead of focusing on lowering your calories, focus on increasing your activity. Work out, go walking, go skateboarding, go do jujitsu, go do a lot of physical activities. People sit too much. They just sit too much. They're way too sedentary. You're not going to overtrain walking.
No.
I walk a couple of miles and go, oh, I better take tomorrow off. That was rough.
And I'm with you there. I do a lot of activity, walking and stuff, and I'll track my steps throughout the day because that app that I use or whatever. But just the nature of my job. Plus, I try to walk for 30 minutes, just like a dedicated, walk for about 30 minutes a day. In addition to 4 jiu-jitsu sessions a week, 4 lifting sessions a week, some supplementary cardio and stuff. I'm getting a ton of workout. I'm getting a ton of activity. Shit, my first month doing jiu-jitsu, I lost 25 pounds, because you don't know what you're doing. You're a spaz, you're over, doing it and you're just killing yourself. But I mean, with that type of training, I'm able to tolerate, 4 hard jiu-jitsu sessions a week, 4 lifting sessions a week, but I'm doing daily activity. I might go do a tempo interval run, nothing high intensity. I use my cardio more. I try to train a little bit more aerobically because it helps with recovery. And when you have better aerobic capacity, you also, you recover better in between workouts. And even though I'm not smashing myself every workout, my recovery is pretty damn good for being in my mid 40s, for training pretty hard, almost daily. But the key is having that daily activity. There's sitting on your ass thinking you're recovering, I think is a big mistake. Yeah. I think getting out there, taking a nice brisk walk, maybe riding a bike, but doing something that's getting your heart rate up, but not to the point that it's a quote unquote workout. Like you said, the difference between activity and workout, I think that is crucial. And people just don't get enough of that nowadays.
A lot of times it's people who like to work out who don't get enough activity, ironically.
Yes.
They get their 3 or 4 gym workouts in per week, but that's it. When they're not doing that, they're sitting around eating crap food, just lying down, watching TV, almost paranoid that if they increase their activity level, it's going to take away from their workouts.
Take away my gains, bro.
The whole point of workout should be to enhance your life, not be your, in my opinion.
Well, somebody, I forgot what it was, but I saw a picture of, I think it was the Russian wrestler Karelin and Alexander Karelin, and a couple of these dudes were jacked. They were shredded. They had physiques that most people would want. I think nowadays most people want like the physique of a highly conditioned MMA fighter, not a pro bodybuilder. And people are so scared of doing cardio, and they're so scared of doing too much work. It's like, you're not going to do too much work. These guys put in serious amounts of work, serious amounts of conditioning, and they've got amazing physiques. I mean, it's like you said, you're probably not training enough nowadays, and it's not intensity, it's frequency and volume. I mean, it's training more frequently, but maybe not super intense. Like, you don't need to max out. I think it's better to train consistently and have daily activity than it is to just go smash yourself one day and then take a few days and do nothing. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, the walking, for me, skateboarding, you're doing jujitsu. In some ways, that probably has some active recovery benefits for the weight training. I mean, I know jujitsu can be really intense too, and people can get injured doing that. So you have to be smart how you train.
You got to be smart. You just have to be smart about your training and put your ego away when you train. But yeah, it can be very complimentary for sure. Yeah,
I think so. Well, that's awesome, man. This is great information. I'm going to put your website and your social media stuff in the description on this episode. But you're based in Atlanta, Georgia area, and are you taking new clients right now, or are there things that people can?
Yeah, man. I'm actually, we're in a really cool kind of phase right now where we're building out a new facility that we're going to be moving into hopefully within the next few weeks. We hope to be in there by mid-April, but it's in the same business park that my current facility's in. Now, we're in a really small unit right now. We got about 1,600 square feet. We have a jiu-jitsu academy as well as my strength training area. So my partner, Chris, who's the jiu-jitsu coach, we're moving into a 3,500 square foot unit. So we're going to more than double our size. We're doing the build out right now. We hope to be in by mid-April. But yeah, I'm definitely, I'm about 85 to 90% capacity right now. 95. I'm averaging about 45 to 55 sessions a week right now in the gym. So I definitely have some availability, and I've got some different, group training opportunities or small, semi-private training opportunities, some programming things that I'm doing in the gym. I'm always available for online consultation and online programming and things like that. But the thing is like I'm an in the gym trainer, man. Like I'm working with my people hands on, and that's the other thing too. Is like I see all these clowns on social media posting every day. It's like dude, you're not training anybody. I'm sorry, you are not training that many people right now if you're living your life on social media. But yeah, I do have some availability right now. So.
Now, there was this lady on Instagram who was a total con artist. I forget her name, but anyway, she had a lot of followers, and she was selling personalized program design.
Is she the girl that just got sued recently?
Yeah. But
yes.
now she's baptizing people. She has another. Yeah. But anyway, she was so lazy as a con artist, though, that people would pay for this program, and she wouldn't send them anything, not even some cookie cutter program, not even a page where she just writes down what she does. Nothing. She just took the money. I go, that's beyond lazy. I mean, if you're going to pull a con, all you got to do is put a little bit of effort into this con. And I'm not saying that's good, but you wouldn't have all these people trying to sue you and people asking for refunds left and right. But one thing people have to realize is you're looking at these Instagram influencers, just because they know how to train themselves, and we're assuming that they know how to train themselves, not genetically gifted, but just because they know how to train themselves doesn't mean that they know how to train other people. That's a totally different skill set, right? Because a lot of people make the mistake of, oh, here's what works for me. So every single person that comes through the door, I'm just going to put them on my regimen. And that's not going to work. Just like what works for you is not what's going to work for, let's say, another trainer or another expert and all that. You don't know what works for you until years of trying things out, putting things together, playing around with things. It takes a long time. You're not going to just figure that out in a year or two.
No.
So it's just this, and also this notion of you're not going to look like someone else either. If I'm 6 feet tall, I can't look at someone who's 6'5" and what works for them and say, okay, let me follow that regimen because I want to look like that person. You're not going to look like anyone but yourself. I mean, you can improve yourself for sure, and you can be very happy with the results. But I think it's unhealthy to look at someone else and try to model that.
Yeah. You might draw some inspiration or something, and that's cool. But yeah, you need to build yourself, whether you're trying to gain muscle, to lose fat, or whatever. It's going to be your physique. It's going to be your muscle. It's going to be and whatever it is, you can expose that through training, but that's what you're going to have. It's going to be whatever your genetics will dictate and whatever you're able to build and stuff. And there's, everybody's different, and that's cool, man. But it does, when it comes down to training, it's different personality types. It's different goals. It's different personalities within the same discipline, man. I mean, I've trained groups of powerlifters. I've trained groups of football players. I trained groups of jiu-jitsu athletes and stuff like that. None of them get trained the same way. They've got different personalities. They got different levels of conditioning. Even my general fitness clients, everybody is different. And that's one of the things that on the art side of training, training is art and it's science. You have to understand the scientific principles and how to apply them. But then there's the art of working with individuals. And I think it's harder to work with the general fitness crowd than it is the athletes. Are easy to train because they're highly motivated. They've got a very specific goal. They don't have, they're younger. They might be in college or they might be in high school. They don't have all the responsibilities that an adult has. Right. The adult general fitness enthusiast is often the hardest person to train because they're traveling, they got work, they've got, it's just that they don't have the luxury of living the lifestyle of the athlete, so they're the hardest ones to work with. But I mean, training is really, really hard, and you have to understand different personality types and how to work with them. And that's why when you see all these ass clowns on Instagram that are marketing themselves as online trainers, DM me for rates and stuff like that, and they don't even have a website. It's always like TNA65@gmail.com or something like that. It's like such bullshit. It's going to be some, because training people online is freaking hard, man. If you do it well, it's hard. And what I found was when I had a lot of online clients, I was really watering down my hourly income or my daily income or my weekly, monthly income, because you're spending so much time on the programming. You're spending so much time analyzing and critiquing videos and stuff like that. It's not worth the $150 that I charge people a month to do it.
It's more to justify it. Yeah. Because if you're doing it right and you're doing it with integrity, then it is going to be a lot more work. If you're just sending people cookie cutter programs, that's easy, but it's not, people aren't going to get the results they're seeking. That's for sure. Because it's not even remotely personalized. And the final thing I'll say is that you do a really good job for people that are interested in transitioning to a vegan diet or eating more plant-based. You do a really good job of designing nutrition programs for people. And I've sent a few people your way, and they always talk about what a great experience that was and how helpful it was.
Yeah, I've always appreciated that, man. And it's not like, when I work with people on that, it's not like I'm not putting together meal plans and stuff like that. Just so people know what I want to do is I help them understand what a healthy plant-based diet is, and then do we need to tweak it? Are they an athlete? Are they just looking for weight loss? Are they, I help them make those, because one of the hardest things that I found with people like athletes who are going plant-based is getting enough calories, to sustain their activity. And one of the benefits of a plant-based diet is it's easy to lose body fat. It's easy to lose body weight. It's easy, because you're eating, nutritionally dense, calorie sparse foods, which are what most whole plant foods are. But when you're talking about an athlete who has a lot of output and they need a lot of calories, there are some things you got to do to increase that caloric density that they just, a regular whole food plant-based approach might not cut it. They've got to get some caloric density in there. And those are the things that I can help them, kind of customize and specialize, which those are considerations that need to be, and then making sure that, all their nutrient needs are being met, and things like that. But it's something that I enjoy doing, and I always appreciate, I get that email from somebody that says, "Hey, Mike referred me." So I'm always very thankful, man. I really appreciate it.
But I think you're showing people how to sustain this lifestyle on their own, not be reliant on you to just feed them cookie cutter meals. It's what healthy eating is. Here's how I put some things together and so forth. Now you need to play around with this. Put together some combinations. Yes. I mean, the way I do a vegan diet, I didn't read that out of a book somewhere. It was just experimentation over the years where I go, hey, these combinations work really well for me.
Yes. And people got different tastes, they got different foods they like. You got to find what people will actually eat. I mean, if somebody doesn't like kale, telling them to eat kale salads all day isn't gonna. You got to find the vegetables they like, the fruits they like, the things they like, while stressing the importance of variety and eating seasonally and things like that. I mean, there's a lot more that goes into it, but you also have to work with their individual palates to make sure that the compliance is there and stuff. And it can be tricky, but I don't, it's nothing like, it shouldn't be a long-term coaching thing. It's like, I like to talk to these people, just a couple, 2-3 times to help get them started. I had some information that I send them, and then I make myself available for any follow-up and stuff like that. But it's like, I want to give them the tools so that they can learn, to adapt and do this on their own, and not just rely on cookie cutter meal plan, programs and stuff like that. And it's worked out pretty well in the past. So
excellent. Well, hey man, I appreciate the time. This was great. It's always a good discussion. It's always nice to catch up with you. And I'm going to put your website below, but since we're talking, what's your website where people can find out more information?
Yeah, man, my website is it's EPTSGym, GYM. So Extreme Performance Training Systems is my business. So EPTSGym.com is my website, and I've got links to everything that I do, all my social media. But I'm really mainly, I'm on Twitter, LinkedIn, Facebook, and Instagram, but I'm mostly active on Instagram. I mean, I try to post a couple, 2-3 times a week, some content-driven things, just based on the people that I'm working with and some of the experiences that I've had. So I try to share some content, a few times during the week. If not that, it's usually pictures of my dog or, some awesome vegan food I found or something.
Sounds familiar. Well, cool, man. This was great. Let me go ahead and stop recording.
Cool.